I, Stephanie, 34 years old, never imagined my own sister would try to force her children into my home. The bombshell dropped during what should have been a routine congratulatory call about her fourth pregnancy. Instead, Rebecca announced her kids would be moving in with me for just a couple months, while she prepared for delivery. When I refused, my entire family turned against me. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a family war that would test every boundary I'd ever set. Before I dive into the full story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family pressure. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this all plays out. Because sometimes the people who should support you the most are the ones who try to take advantage of your kindness. My life before this drama was peaceful and well organized. I'd built a successful career as a marketing executive, worked hard for my comfortable 2-bedroom condo in Boston, and deliberately chosen not to have children. My sister, Rebecca, 2 years younger at 32, had taken a completely different path. She'd married young and quickly had 3 children, now ages 8, 6, and 4. We were close growing up, but our relationship had grown increasingly strained since she started having kids. I loved my nieces and nephew, but visits were always chaotic, with Rebecca seeming to expect me to step in as an extra parent rather than an aunt. Still, I tried to maintain a good relationship for the sake of family harmony. That Thursday evening, my phone lit up with Rebecca's name. I answered with genuine happiness, as we hadn't spoken in a few weeks. "Hey Becca, how are you?" I asked. "I'm pregnant," she blurted out. "Baby number 4 is on the way." I was surprised but offered my congratulations. "That's wonderful news. How are you feeling?" "Awful, actually," she said, her voice shifting to a familiar tone I'd come to recognize as her preamble to asking for something. "This pregnancy is so much harder than the others. The doctor says I need to take it really easy, especially in the last trimester." "That must be tough with 3 kids already," I replied, sensing where this might be going but hoping I was wrong. "Yeah, about that," Rebecca continued without hesitation. "So, we've figured it all out. The kids will move in with you for the last 2 months before I give birth. You have the space and no kids of your own. It'll be easy." The casual way she dropped this bombshell, not as a request, but as a decision already made, left me momentarily speechless. She continued talking, outlining her plan as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion. "Wait, hold on," I finally interrupted. "You can't just decide your kids are moving in with me. That's not something you get to decide for me." There was a pause on the line. "What do you mean?" Rebecca asked, her tone sharpening. "It's just for 2 months. You have 2 bedrooms and you live alone. Why would this be a problem?" I took a deep breath. "Because this is my home, my life, and my choice. I'm sorry you're having a difficult pregnancy, but I can't take on 3 children for 2 months. That's not a small ask, Becca." What followed was an explosion of anger I hadn't anticipated. Rebecca accused me of being selfish, of not caring about family, of always putting my precious career before what really mattered. Before I could respond, she delivered a parting shot that would echo in my mind for days. "You've always been jealous that I have a real family and you're alone. Well, stay alone then." She hung up. I sat in stunned silence, my phone still warm in my hand. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a family war that would test every boundary I'd ever set. I had no idea that standing my ground would cause my entire family to implode, or that my sister had been planning this ambush for much longer than I realized. To understand why Rebecca's demand shocked me but didn't completely surprise me, you need to know our history. Growing up, our family had clear roles that were established early and reinforced often. I was the responsible one, while Rebecca was the golden child. From elementary school onward, I was expected to excel academically, help around the house, and generally be the model daughter. Stephanie is so mature for her age, adults would coo, while my parents nodded proudly. This wasn't entirely a compliment, it meant I was given responsibilities far beyond my years while Rebecca was allowed to just be a kid. When I brought home an A, I received a concerned talk about maintaining standards. When Rebecca brought home C's, she got praise for trying her best. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. I learned quickly that the path to parental approval was through achievement and reliability. "Stephanie will handle it," became a family mantra whenever a task needed doing, whether it was organizing family vacations as a teenager, mediating family conflicts, or being the designated driver at family functions. My needs and wants often took a back seat to everyone else's, particularly Rebecca's. After college, where I worked 2 jobs to supplement my partial scholarship, I took an entry-level position at a marketing firm. The hours were long, the pay was modest, but I saw potential for growth. Rebecca, meanwhile, married her high school boyfriend James just after getting her associate's degree. By 24, she had her first child, Emma, followed quickly by Jack and then Lily. "When are you going to settle down?" became my mother's favorite question at family gatherings. My father would add, "You know, you can't work forever. Family is what really matters in the end." They spoke as if my career was a temporary distraction rather than a deliberate choice and fulfilling path. Meanwhile, I sacrificed and worked hard for every advancement. I moved cities twice for promotions. I spent evenings and weekends building my portfolio while friends were socializing. I saved diligently for years to afford the down payment on my condo. None of these choices were respected as the deliberate life path they were. The pattern of Rebecca's expectations began small. First came the requests for last-minute babysitting when her regular arrangements fell through. "You're her aunt," she'd say when I explained I had work commitments. "Family comes first." Then came the small loans when she and James were short on cash loans that were rarely repaid. Each time I established a boundary, I was made to feel selfish. During family gatherings over the past year, I'd noticed Rebecca had begun a subtle campaign. She would dramatically detail her pregnancy fatigue and complications within earshot of relatives. "I just don't know how I'll manage with the new baby," she'd sigh, while looking meaningfully in my direction. "If only I had more help." At Christmas, she'd cornered our Aunt Martha and loudly discussed how perfect my spare bedroom would be for the kids, a conversation that stopped abruptly when I walked into the room. In retrospect, she'd been planting seeds for months, preparing the family to back her play when she finally made her demand. The day after our phone call, my phone began lighting up with text messages. From Mom, "Your sister needs you. I raised you better than this." From Dad, "Family helps family. Very disappointed in you, Stephanie." From Aunt Martha, "Rebecca told us about your refusal, those poor children. Even my cousin Tyler, who I'd always been close with, didn't think you'd turn your back on family like this." Not one message asked for my side of the story. Not one person questioned whether Rebecca's demand was reasonable. The family narrative had already been written. Stephanie was selfish, Rebecca was in need, and that was all that mattered. I put my phone on silent and tried to focus on work, but my hands were shaking. This wasn't just about 2 months of babysitting anymore. This was about a lifetime of being expected to sacrifice my needs for others, and the realization that my entire family viewed me primarily as a resource to be used rather than a person with valid boundaries. My sister hadn't just asked me for help, she'd launched a campaign to force my compliance through family pressure. And from the looks of it, her strategy was working perfectly. 3 days after Rebecca's phone call, my mother called to remind me about the monthly family dinner at my parents' house. These dinners were normally scheduled for the last Sunday of each month, but this one had been moved up because your father has a business trip coming up. Looking back, I should have been suspicious of the sudden change. I considered making an excuse, but decided it would be better to face the situation head-on rather than hide. Perhaps in person, I could make my family understand my perspective. I spent the drive to my parents' suburban home rehearsing calm, reasonable explanations for my refusal, determined to keep my composure regardless of what was said. The moment I walked through the front door, I felt the chill in the atmosphere. My mother's greeting was perfunctory, without the usual hug. My father barely looked up from his newspaper. Aunt Martha and Uncle Phil were already seated in the living room, along with my cousin Tyler and his wife. All conversation stopped when I entered. "Hello, everyone," I said, trying to keep my voice light. The responses were minimal, some just nodding in acknowledgement. 20 minutes later, Rebecca made her entrance. She walked slowly, one hand resting on her still flat stomach, the other being held supportively by James. She looked pale and exhausted, though I couldn't help noticing that she'd had time to perfect her makeup and hair despite her supposed debilitating condition. "Oh, good, you're all here," she said weakly, as James guided her to the most comfortable armchair. "I wasn't sure I'd make it today. The morning sickness has been just awful." My mother rushed to bring her a glass of water. "You poor thing. You shouldn't push yourself." I caught James's eye, expecting to see concern for his wife, but instead found him studying the carpet, his expression unreadable. This was unusual for him. Normally, he was quick to support Rebecca in everything. Dinner was a tense affair. Between bites of roast chicken, my mother made pointed comments about family helping family and how some people just didn't understand sacrifice. My father, normally quiet during family disputes, surprised me by directly criticizing my selfish lifestyle. "When I was your age, I was raising 2 children and working 60 hours a week," he said, jabbing his fork in my direction. "I never had the luxury of just thinking about myself." "Dad, my decision not to have children isn't about luxury," I responded, struggling to keep my voice even. "It's a valid life choice." "A convenient one," Rebecca muttered. I took a deep breath. "Rebecca, I understand you're having a difficult pregnancy, but expecting me to take in 3 children for 2 months isn't reasonable. I work full-time. I'm not set up for childcare. You have a guest room," my mother interjected. "And you could work from home some days. Or take family leave," Aunt Martha added. "That's what it's there for." I looked around the table in disbelief. Family leave is for taking care of your own family in an emergency, not for babysitting your sister's kids because she's having another baby she chose to have. The table fell silent. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "That's what this is about, isn't it?" she said, her voice trembling. "You think I shouldn't be having another baby. You've always judged my choices. That's not what I—" "Enough," my father cut in. "Stephanie, we didn't want to do this as a group, but you've left us no choice." I realized with dawning horror that this wasn't a family dinner, it was an intervention. One by one, family members took turns explaining why I needed to step up and help Rebecca. They'd clearly coordinated their talking points. The underlying message was clear. My time, home, and preferences were less valuable than Rebecca's because I didn't have children. Finally, James cleared his throat. It was the first time he'd spoken all evening. "There's something else you should know," he said quietly. "We're having financial difficulties. Serious ones. We might lose the house." Rebecca shot him a look that could only be described as furious. "What James means," she quickly interjected, "is that we're downsizing to a smaller place before the baby comes. It just makes sense. But the new apartment won't be ready until after the baby is born. And it's only 2 bedrooms, so having the kids stay with you would really help with the transition." Something wasn't adding up. "If you're downsizing for financial reasons, why are you having another child now?" I asked. The room went silent again. James looked down at his plate. "That's none of your business," Rebecca snapped. "The point is, we need help, and you're the only one who can provide it." "What about Mom and Dad?" I asked. "They have more space than I do." "Your father and I are too old to keep up with 3 young children," my mother said quickly. "You're young. You have the energy." I looked around the table, feeling like I'd stepped into the twilight zone. "So, let me get this straight. Rebecca and James are having serious financial problems. They're losing their house, having another baby they can't afford, and the solution is for me to take their 3 children indefinitely?" "It's just for 2 months," Rebecca insisted. "But wouldn't meet my eyes." "Then why did James say the new apartment won't have room for all the kids?" "Sounds like you're expecting a more permanent arrangement." The silence that followed confirmed my suspicion. This wasn't about Rebecca's pregnancy at all. They were trying to offload their children onto me because they couldn't afford to care for them. I stood up from the table. "I'm sorry about your financial situation, truly. But your children are your responsibility, not mine. I'm willing to help in other ways, but I will not be taking your children into my home, temporarily or otherwise." Rebecca's face contorted with anger. "You've always been jealous of my family," she shouted as I grabbed my purse. "You're just a lonely, bitter woman who can't stand that I have what you never will." I paused at the door, looking back at the family that had gathered to ambush me. "No, Rebecca. I have exactly the life I chose. And I won't apologize for protecting it. As I drove home, my phone exploded with messages, each more accusatory than the last. But beneath the anger and hurt, I couldn't shake the feeling that something even bigger was going on, something the family wasn't telling me. The day after the disastrous family dinner, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My head was pounding, and I couldn't focus. Something about the whole situation felt off. Rebecca's financial problems, James's unusual silence, the apartment that supposedly wouldn't have room for all the kids. None of it added up. Instead of wallowing, I decided to do what I do best at work: investigate. Rebecca and James's financial problems hadn't appeared overnight. There must be more to the story. I started with a text to Michael, James's younger brother. We weren't close, but we'd always been friendly at family gatherings. I kept my message casual, asking if he'd heard about Rebecca and James's housing situation and expressing concern. His response came an hour later. "Can we talk on the phone instead?" When I called, Michael seemed hesitant at first, but eventually opened up. "Look, I don't want to get in the middle of family stuff, but James has been struggling with a gambling problem for about 2 years now," he said. "It started small sports betting, mostly, but it's gotten worse. Their house isn't being downsized, Stephanie. It's being foreclosed on." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Does Rebecca know? She must. They've borrowed money from everyone in the family. My parents remortgaged their retirement cottage to help them about 6 months ago. After thanking Michael for his honesty, I hung up and immediately opened social media. If Rebecca and James were in such dire financial straits, their online presence might reveal inconsistencies. What I found was jarring. While James had been relatively inactive online in recent months, Rebecca's Instagram told a very different story than the one of financial hardship. Just 3 weeks ago, she'd posted photos of a new designer handbag. 6 weeks ago, she'd shared pictures from a weekend spa getaway to distress before baby news. There were recent posts showing expensive new outfits for the kids, a kitchen remodel completed just 4 months ago, and a lavish anniversary dinner. I took screenshots of everything, then began reaching out to other family members under the pretense of trying to understand how I could help Rebecca in other ways. Within hours, I had uncovered a pattern that made my blood run cold. Rebecca had told our cousin Emily that she needed money for Emma's emergency dental surgery during the same month she'd told our Uncle Robert that she needed help covering Jack's school tuition. She'd asked Aunt Martha for a loan to repair their roof while simultaneously telling my parents the money was for car repairs. Different stories, different needs, same result: family members opening their wallets. The next day, I took a personal day from work and drove to Rebecca's neighborhood, parking a block away from her house. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a spy movie, but I needed to see for myself what was going on. Around 3:15 p.m., I watched as Rebecca picked up the kids from the school bus stop. I waited until they'd gone inside, then walked up to the house, heart pounding. Emma, my 8-year-old niece, answered the door. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Auntie Stephanie." "Mom, Auntie Stephanie is here." Rebecca appeared in the hallway, surprise quickly replaced by wariness. "Emma, take your brother and sister upstairs to play, please." Once the kids were out of earshot, Rebecca crossed her arms. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to talk about how I can help," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "Can I come in?" Reluctantly, she let me in. The house looked normal, not like a home in the process of being packed up for a move. I asked about their plans for the new apartment, careful to keep my tone concerned rather than accusatory. Rebecca's answers were vague and contradictory. The apartment was in the next town over. Or maybe 2 towns over. It would be ready in 6 weeks. Or possibly 8. She couldn't remember the exact address right now. I asked if I could use the bathroom, and on my way back, I accidentally took a wrong turn and ended up in Emma's bedroom, where all 3 kids were playing. Auntie Stephanie. Lily, the youngest, ran to hug my legs. "Are you here to see our going-away presents?" "Going away presents?" I asked, my heart sinking. "For when we go live with you," Jack exclaimed, pointing to 3 small suitcases lined up against the wall. "Mom says we're staying with you for a long, long time while she takes care of the new baby." Emma nodded enthusiastically. Mom says maybe we'll even go to school near your house next year. I already looked up the school online. They have a really good art program. I forced a smile while my mind raced. That sounds exciting. How long has your mom been planning this? Forever, Emma said with the exaggeration typical of an 8-year-old. Since way before Christmas. She said it was a secret until she told you about the baby. I heard rapid footsteps in the hallway. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her expression thunderous. Kids, go downstairs and watch TV. I need to talk to Aunt Stephanie. When we were alone, I confronted her. A long, long time? School near my house next year? Rebecca, what's really going on here? Her face crumpled. For a moment, I thought she might finally tell me the truth. Instead, she went on the offensive. You had no right to come here and interrogate my children. I told you it would just be for a couple of months until I recover from the birth. The kids seem to think it's a much more permanent arrangement, I replied steadily. And why would you tell them this was happening before you even asked me? Because I knew you'd help us, she shouted. That's what family does. But you've always been selfish. You've always had everything so easy. I stared at her, incredulous. Easy? I worked 2 jobs through college while you partied. I worked 60-hour weeks to build my career while you were busy judging me for not having kids. And now I'm selfish because I won't upend my life to fix your problems? Get out of my house, she hissed. Gladly, I replied. But this conversation isn't over. My final stop that day was my parents' house. They were surprised to see me, but let me in. I laid out everything I'd discovered. James's gambling, Rebecca's lies about why she needed money, and the plan to move the kids in with me permanently. I expected shock. Instead, my mother looked away while my father became defensive. James is getting help for his problem, he said. And Rebecca is doing the best she can. By planning to dump her kids on me without my knowledge or consent? I asked. My mother finally spoke. We thought once the children were with you, you'd see how rewarding it is to have a family. That you'd want to help. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer. You knew. You knew all along that this wasn't about the pregnancy. You were in on it. Neither denied it. In fact, my father had the audacity to say, family helps family, no matter what. We already told Rebecca you'd take the kids, my mother admitted quietly. We promised her. I stood up, unable to stay in that house a minute longer. You had no right to make promises on my behalf. None at all. As I drove home, I realized the magnitude of what I was facing. This wasn't just Rebecca trying to manipulate me, it was a coordinated family effort to force me into becoming a parent to children who weren't mine, to clean up messes I hadn't made. And they had been planning it for months, without the slightest concern for what I wanted. The betrayal cut deep, but it also strengthened my resolve. I would not be manipulated or guilt-tripped into taking on a responsibility that wasn't mine. Not by Rebecca. Not by my parents. Not by anyone. A week after my discoveries, I was in the middle of presenting quarterly marketing projections to our executive team when my assistant quietly entered the conference room and slipped me a note. Your sister is in the lobby with 3 children. Says it's an emergency. My heart dropped, but I managed to finish my presentation before excusing myself. When I reached the lobby, the scene that greeted me was exactly what I'd feared. Rebecca standing with Emma, Jack, and Lily, each child clutching a backpack. A small suitcase sat on the floor beside them. Rebecca, what are you doing here? I kept my voice low, conscious of my coworkers passing through the lobby. I have an emergency doctor's appointment, she said loudly enough for nearby people to hear. The babysitter canceled last minute, and I remembered you said you wanted to help in other ways. She emphasized these last words pointedly. I pulled her aside, away from the children and curious onlookers. This is completely inappropriate. You can't just show up at my workplace with no warning. It's just for a few hours, she insisted, though the suitcase suggested otherwise. The kids have snacks and activities in their backpacks. They can sit quietly in your office. I don't have an office, Rebecca. I have a cubicle in an open floor plan. And I have meetings all afternoon. Well, I can't miss this appointment. It's about the baby. Her hand moved protectively to her stomach. a gesture I was beginning to recognize as performative. "Rebecca," I said firmly, "you need to take your children and leave. Now." Her expression hardened. "So you're refusing to help me, even for a few hours? After everything I've done for you?" This blatant attempt at manipulation in my workplace was the final straw. "What exactly have you done for me, Rebecca? Lied to me? Tried to dump your children on me without my consent? Turned our entire family against me with false narratives?" Her eyes widened at my direct confrontation. For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words. "Mom." Emma tugged at Rebecca's sleeve. "I thought we were staying with Aunt Stephanie." Rebecca shot me a venomous look before turning to the children. "Change of plans. Aunt Stephanie is too busy for us. Let's go." As they walked away, I heard Jack ask, "But what about our stuff in the suitcase?" Rebecca hushed him quickly. I returned to my department in a daze, only to find my boss, Diana, waiting at my desk. "Everything okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Your sister seemed quite upset." I hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. "Not really. My sister is trying to pressure me into taking her 3 children for an extended period, and when I refused, she thought bringing them to my workplace might force my hand." To my surprise, Diana nodded in understanding. "Family dynamics can be complicated. My brother once tried to guilt me into investing in his foolproof business idea by bringing his business partner to Thanksgiving dinner." Her understanding was a lifeline I hadn't expected. "I'm sorry about the disruption," I said. "Don't be." "But Stephanie," she added, "if this situation is affecting your work, take some personal time. Sort it out. We need you focused." That evening, I discovered that Rebecca's workplace ambush was just the beginning. A colleague sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post Rebecca had made just hours after leaving my office. "Heartbroken today." When you're a mother facing a high-risk pregnancy and your own sister refuses to help, even for a few hours during a critical doctor's appointment, some people just don't understand family. "Please pray for my children, who were so confused when their aunt turned them away." The post had dozens of sympathetic comments, many from mutual friends expressing disbelief at my supposed callousness. One comment from my cousin Emily particularly stung. "I always thought Stephanie was different. Guess career women really do lose their humanity." I was still reeling from this public character assassination when my phone rang. It was my landlord, sounding uncomfortable. "Miss Taylor, we've received several calls from a woman claiming that you're planning to move 3 children into your unit without updating your lease. As you know, that would be a violation of our occupancy rules." "That's absolutely not true," I assured him, realizing immediately who was behind these calls. "My sister is trying to pressure me into taking her children, but I've refused." He seemed relieved but cautioned me that any change in occupancy would need to be officially processed. I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking with anger. The next morning, I found a large scratch down the driver's side of my car, clearly made by a key or similar object. Under the windshield wiper was a note that simply read, "Family first." The handwriting wasn't Rebecca's, but I strongly suspected my mother. The thought that my own parent would vandalize my property to punish me for setting boundaries was almost too painful to process. That evening, I received an email from someone claiming to be Rebecca's lawyer, suggesting that I had a moral obligation to assist a family member in need and that my sister was exploring all options to ensure her children's welfare during her high-risk pregnancy. I forwarded the email to a friend who worked at a law firm, who confirmed it wasn't from a real attorney, the law office didn't exist, and the tone was unprofessional. It was clearly another intimidation tactic. The final blow came when a mutual friend called to check on me, having heard I was going through something difficult. When I asked what she meant, she hesitantly explained that Rebecca had been telling people I was having a mental breakdown due to bitter regret over my life choices and was lashing out at her children as a result. As I hung up, I realized I'd reached my breaking point. Rebecca wasn't just trying to manipulate me into taking her children, she was systematically destroying my reputation, endangering my job, and potentially setting up a narrative that I was unstable, perhaps to later claim I'd agreed to her plan during a confused state. This was no longer just about standing my ground. This was about protecting myself from a level of calculated malice I'd never expected from my own sister. The time for passive resistance was over. If Rebecca wanted a fight, I would give her one, but on my terms, with facts and boundaries rather than manipulation and lies. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. Every text, every email, every social media post, every incident. I would need it all for what was coming next. The next morning, I called the only lawyer I knew personally, Sarah Zhang, a college friend who specialized in family law. After explaining my situation, she agreed to meet me during her lunch break. Based on what you've told me, you're not legally obligated to take in your sister's children, Sarah assured me after reviewing my documentation. But I'm concerned about the escalating pattern of harassment. The car damage, the calls to your landlord, the public defamation, these cross legal boundaries. She helped me draft a formal cease and desist letter outlining the harassment and demanding that Rebecca, my parents, and anyone acting on their behalf stop contacting my workplace, spreading false information about me, damaging my property, or attempting to coerce me into taking custody of the children. This isn't legally binding, Sarah warned, but it establishes a paper trail and shows you're serious. If the harassment continues, we can discuss restraining orders. I thanked her, paid her consultation fee, and left with the letter. Having a clear action plan helped me feel more in control, but I was troubled by another aspect of the situation. James' role in all this. Throughout the entire ordeal, James had been suspiciously quiet, letting Rebecca take the lead in their scheme. It didn't fit with the brother-in-law I'd known for 10 years, a man who, despite his faults, had always seemed to care about his family. I decided to confront him directly. Instead of calling, which would give him the chance to evade me, I went to his workplace, a local construction company where he worked as a project manager. I waited in the parking lot until I saw him leaving the office for lunch. Stephanie? He looked startled to see me. What are you doing here? We need to talk, James. About Rebecca's plans for your children. His eyes darted around as if looking for escape routes, but eventually he nodded. Not here. There's a coffee shop around the corner. Once seated with our coffees, I got straight to the point. Rebecca is trying to force me to take your children permanently. Not just during her pregnancy. I want to know if you're on board with this plan. James stared into his cup for a long moment before answering. It wasn't supposed to go like this, he said quietly. It was just supposed to be a temporary arrangement while we got back on our feet. Because of your gambling debts? I asked bluntly. His head snapped up. How did you? Your brother told me, I said. And unlike the rest of the family, I'm not willing to pretend this isn't happening. James seemed to deflate before my eyes, the facade of control completely abandoned. I've lost everything, Stephanie. The house, our savings, Rebecca's inheritance from her grandmother. We're drowning in debt. I've been in Gamblers Anonymous for 3 months, but the damage is done. And the new baby? I asked. He winced. That was unplanned. By the time Rebecca found out, we were already in financial freefall. She refused to consider alternatives. So her solution was to keep the baby but give away your existing children? She didn't see it that way, he defended weakly. She thought you'd be happy to help. That maybe you secretly wanted kids but were just focused on your career. She convinced herself and everyone else that you'd eventually thank her for giving you the chance to be a mother. The absurdity of this reasoning left me momentarily speechless. James, I deliberately chose not to have children. I've been clear about that my entire adult life. I know, he admitted. I told her it was wrong to spring this on you, that we should just be honest about needing help. But Rebecca has always been able to justify anything once she decides it's what she wants. And what about what your children want? I asked. Do they understand they're being shuffled away because of your mistakes? James flinched as if I'd slapped him. They know we're having money problems. They don't know the extent or the cause. Rebecca told them they'd be staying with you temporarily, but she's been preparing them for a longer stay. By telling them they'll be going to school near me next year, I finished. James, this is incredibly damaging to your children. They deserve stability and honesty. He nodded miserably. I know. But Rebecca won't listen to reason anymore. She's fixated on this plan being the solution to everything. I took a deep breath. I'm sending you and Rebecca a cease and desist letter about the harassment. It stops now, or I'll take legal action. And I'm not taking your children not for 2 months, not for a weekend. Not at all. James looked up, suddenly alarmed. Harassment? What harassment? I showed him photos of my scratched car, screenshots of Rebecca's defamatory social media posts, and explained about the calls to my landlord and workplace. I had no idea, he said, looking genuinely shocked. I swear, Stephanie, I didn't know she was doing all this. I believed him. James had many faults, but he had never been a good liar. Then it's time you took some responsibility, James. Get control of your wife's behavior before it crosses into criminal territory. After leaving James, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Eleanor Richards, a family therapist who had been recommended by Sarah. I wasn't naive enough to think I could fix my family's toxic dynamics, but I needed professional guidance to process what was happening and establish healthy boundaries. What you're describing is a pattern of emotional manipulation that likely goes back to your childhood, Dr. Richards observed after I'd explained the situation. Your family has cast you in the role of rescuer and problem solver, and they're reacting with hostility when you refuse to play that part. But why go to these lengths? I asked. The public shaming, the ambush at my workplace, the vandalism, it seems extreme even for them. When long-established family dynamics are threatened, the reaction can be surprisingly intense, she explained. Your refusal isn't just about this specific request, it's a rejection of the role they've assigned you. That feels threatening to the entire family system they've built. Her insights helped me understand what I was facing. But the practical question remained, how could I protect myself? The answer came unexpectedly the next day. After the cease and desist letters were delivered, I decided to take additional security measures. I installed a video doorbell and security cameras around my condo, a precaution that proved prescient sooner than expected. 2 days later, while I was at work, I received an alert from my security system. The footage showed my mother and Rebecca at my front door. My mother used a key one I'd given her years ago for emergencies to let them in. I watched in real time as they entered my spare bedroom carrying shopping bags. Rebecca began unpacking children's bedding, arranging it on the bed, while my mother set up a small desk for Emma to do homework. I heard her say clearly on the audio, I called the police immediately, explaining that people were in my home without permission. I left work and drove home, arriving just as the police were questioning my mother and Rebecca. The look of shocked betrayal on their faces when I confirmed I wanted them removed from my property was almost comical. But we're your family, my mother protested as the officer escorted them out. Family doesn't break into my home, I replied calmly. After they left, the officer advised me to change my locks and file for a restraining order given the escalating nature of the situation. That evening, I received a strange call from Linda Johnson, Rebecca's next-door neighbor. We weren't close, and she seemed nervous. I'm sorry to intrude, she began hesitantly, but I've been concerned about your sister's children for some time. There are often loud arguments, and the children seem increasingly anxious. Today, I overheard Rebecca telling Emma that she would be getting rid of them soon because of the new baby. The little girl was crying, asking why they couldn't stay with their parents. My stomach churned. Thank you for telling me this, Linda. I wouldn't normally get involved in family matters, she continued, but something doesn't feel right. I've seen your parents taking the children for days at a time recently, and James hasn't been around much. I thought you should know. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. The thought of my nieces and nephew believing they were being gotten rid of because of the new baby was heartbreaking. While I had no obligation to take them in, I did feel responsible for ensuring they weren't being emotionally harmed. After a sleepless night, considering my options, I made one of the hardest phone calls of my life to Child Protective Services. I reported what Linda had told me, as well as the financial instability and pattern of deception I'd uncovered. I explained that I wasn't seeking custody, but was concerned about the children's emotional well-being and stability. The caseworker assured me they would investigate discreetly, and that their goal was always to keep families together when possible, with support services rather than removal. I hung up feeling both relieved and guilty. I had never imagined becoming the person who called CPS on family members. But my concern for the children outweighed my discomfort. If Rebecca and James were genuinely struggling to care for their kids, they needed professional intervention. not a convenient relative to dump the responsibility on. My boundary-setting journey had begun with a simple no to an unreasonable request. Now it had led me to take legal action against my own family, to protect myself and report concerns about child welfare. Each step had been necessary, but the path ahead was uncertain and likely to become even more difficult. A week after my call to CPS, I received an unexpected text from my father. Family meeting at our house. Saturday, 2 p.m. Everyone will be there. This needs to end. I was immediately suspicious of another ambush, but after consulting with Dr. Richards, I decided to attend with preparations. I created a detailed document outlining everything that had happened, with dates, screenshots, and photographs of the harassment I'd experienced. I made copies for everyone who would be there. I also asked my friend Megan to accompany me both for moral support and as a witness to whatever transpired. If things go sideways, I told her, we leave immediately. When we arrived at my parents' house, I was surprised to see not just my immediate family, but extended relatives as well. Aunt Martha and Uncle Phil, Cousin Tyler and his wife, James's brother Michael, and even my grandmother were seated in the living room. Rebecca and James sat on the couch, with my parents standing behind them like sentries. Rebecca's expression was a mixture of anger and triumph, clearly. She expected this larger audience to reinforce her narrative of me as the villain. Stephanie, my father began formally, we've called this meeting because this family situation has gotten out of hand. It's time to resolve our differences and find a path forward. I nodded, remaining standing. I agree. That's why I've prepared these. I distributed my document packets to everyone in the room. What is this? My mother asked suspiciously. A complete, factual account of what's happened over the past month, I replied. Before anyone speaks, I'd like you all to read it. It includes screenshots of Rebecca's social media posts about me, photos of my vandalized car, security footage of Mom and Rebecca breaking into my condo, and documentation of the calls made to my workplace and landlord. The room fell silent as everyone began to read. Rebecca's face paled as she flipped through the pages. My mother started to object. But my father, after glancing at the contents, quieted her with a hand on her shoulder. When everyone had finished reading, I spoke again. I'm not here to be attacked, manipulated, or guilted. I'm here to establish the truth and set clear boundaries. Rebecca and James are facing financial difficulties due to James's gambling addiction. Instead of addressing this honestly, they've created a plan to move their children in with me permanently while keeping the new baby. When I refused, Rebecca launched a campaign of harassment, defamation, and intimidation with the support of my parents. That's not how it happened, Rebecca began, but her usual confidence was missing. It's exactly how it happened, I countered. And I have the evidence right in front of everyone. My Aunt Margaret, who had been quietly reading the documents, looked up. Rebecca, is this true? Were you planning to give your children to Stephanie permanently? Rebecca squirmed under her aunt's direct questioning. Not permanently, just until we got back on our feet. And when would that be? Margaret pressed. After you moved to a smaller place that conveniently wouldn't have room for all the children? My grandmother, who had been silent until now, spoke up. This reminds me of what your mother tried to do to Margaret when you girls were small. All eyes turned to her in surprise. Helen wanted to go back to work after Rebecca was born, my grandmother explained, referring to my mother. She tried to convince Margaret to take Stephanie for just a few months while she got established in her career. When Margaret refused, Helen didn't speak to her for nearly a year. I stared at my mother in shock. She had tried to give me away as a child? This revelation cast our entire family dynamic in a new and disturbing light. That was completely different, my mother insisted. But her face had flushed red. Was it? Margaret challenged. Or is this a pattern? When Helen couldn't dump Stephanie on me, she made Stephanie into the family caretaker instead, always responsible for everyone else's needs. The room erupted into overlapping conversations as family members began taking sides. Some defended Rebecca and my parents, arguing that family helps family. Others, having seen the evidence, expressed concern about the manipulation and harassment. James, who had been silent until now, suddenly stood up. Enough. His voice cut through the chaos. It's all true. The gambling, the debts, the plan to leave the kids with Stephanie, all of it. I've been too much of a coward to stand up to Rebecca. But Stephanie's right, this isn't fair to anyone, especially our children. Rebecca gasped. James, how could you? Because I'm tired of the lies, Becca, he said wearily. We need real help, not schemes and manipulation. Our children deserve better than to believe they're being gotten rid of because of the new baby. I never said that, Rebecca protested. Your neighbor heard you, Rebecca, I said quietly. She called me because she was concerned. Rebecca's face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw genuine emotion break through her calculated facade. I didn't mean it like that, she sobbed. I can't handle everything. The house, the bills, 3 kids, another on the way. I thought if the older ones stayed with Stephanie, at least they'd be okay while we figured things out. By moving to another state? I asked, revealing another piece of information I'd discovered. Were you planning to tell them, or just disappear with the new baby? Gasps around the room confirmed this was news to most of the family. James looked shocked as well. Moving? He asked. Rebecca, what is she talking about? Rebecca's silence was damning. In that moment, the family's perception shifted decisively. This was no longer about me refusing to help my sister, it was about uncovering a disturbing plan that would have devastated 3 innocent children. I think, my Uncle Phil said slowly, that what Rebecca and James need isn't for Stephanie to take their children. They need professional help, financial counseling, therapy, and support for their family as a whole. Heads nodded around the room. Even my father, Rebecca's staunchest defender, looked shaken. I've prepared a list of resources, I said, pulling out another set of papers. Family counselors, financial advisors who specialize in debt recovery, and parenting support groups. I'm willing to help find these services and even contribute financially to them, but I will not be taking custody of the children, and the harassment stops now. I turned to my parents. That includes you. Change my locks. Replace the key you stole. Pay for the damage to my car. And publicly correct the false narrative you've helped spread about me. My mother started to object, but my father placed a restraining hand on her arm. We will, he said quietly. Rebecca, seeing her support crumbling, made a last desperate play. If you ever want to see your nieces and nephew again, you'll help us the way we're asking, she threatened. That's not your decision to make anymore, James said firmly. I'm their father, and I say Stephanie will always be welcome in their lives. The meeting continued for another hour, with old grievances aired and new boundaries established. Not everyone was convinced. My mother remained largely defensive, and Rebecca oscillated between tearful apologies and renewed manipulation attempts, but the family dynamic had fundamentally shifted. As Megan and I prepared to leave, my Aunt Margaret pulled me aside. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening to you earlier, she said. The family put so much on your shoulders for so long that it became normal to everyone except you. You were right to draw the line. I hugged her, grateful for the validation. Thank you for speaking up today. Your grandmother and I will make sure they follow through on making amends, she promised. And if they don't, you still have family who supports you, just not the ones you expected. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The road ahead would still be difficult. Family patterns don't change overnight, but for the first time, I had hope that healing was possible. Not through enabling toxic behavior, but by standing firm in my boundaries and truth. 6 months passed after the family meeting that changed everything. As autumn leaves gave way to winter snow and then spring blossoms, my life transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined when Rebecca first announced her pregnancy and outrageous demand. The most immediate change was at work. Without the constant stress of family drama and harassment, I was able to focus fully on my career. The promotion I'd been working toward for 2 years finally came through, along with a significant salary increase. Diana, my boss, specifically mentioned my grace under pressure during the family crisis as evidence of my leadership potential. My personal life blossomed as well. The boundaries I'd established with my family created space for new relationships. I began dating David, a kind and thoughtful architect I met at a conference. Unlike previous partners who had been put off by my family's intrusions, David respected my boundaries and supported my journey toward healthier relationships. One rainy April afternoon, I received an unexpected email from James. "Stephanie, I wanted to update you on our situation. Rebecca and I are divorcing. After months of therapy, both individual and couples, it became clear that our relationship wasn't healthy for either of us or for the children. Rebecca gave birth to Lucy in February. She's healthy, but Rebecca has been struggling with postpartum depression on top of everything else. The children are primarily staying with me in the apartment we eventually found. Rebecca sees them 3 days a week. I know this isn't what you expected to hear, but I wanted you to know that your stand against our plan was the wake-up call we both needed. The children ask about you often. When you're ready, they would love to see their aunt again." The email left me with mixed emotions, sadness for the family breakdown, but relief that the children were being cared for appropriately. I responded with congratulations on Lucy's birth and promised to be in touch about visiting the children soon. A week later, my father called and asked if he could stop by my condo. I agreed with some trepidation, but when he arrived, I was struck by how much older he looked, as if the events of the past months had aged him a decade. "I owe you an apology," he said after declining my offer of coffee. "A real one. Not just the words we said at that family meeting. We sat in my living room, the same space where my mother and Rebecca had tried to set up children's bedrooms without my permission. I've been thinking a lot about how we raised you," he continued. "The expectations we put on you from such a young age. The way we made you responsible for everything while giving Rebecca a pass. It wasn't fair." "No," I agreed quietly. "It wasn't. Your mother is having a harder time seeing it," he admitted. "But she's trying. The thing is, Stephanie, we were repeating patterns from our own childhoods without even realizing it. I was the responsible one in my family too, always picking up the slack for my younger brothers." For the first time, my father opened up about his own childhood, sharing stories I'd never heard about the burdens placed on him. I began to understand that while his actions had hurt me, they came from his own unhealed wounds. "I'm not saying this excuses what we did," he finished, "but I want you to know we're working on it. Your mother and I started seeing a therapist of our own. We want to do better not just for you, but for all our grandchildren." As he left, he handed me a small box. Inside was a new key to my condo, along with a check that more than covered the cost of repairing my car. "It's a start," he said simply. Over the following weeks, I cautiously rebuilt relationships with my family on my terms. I began with visits to see the children at James's apartment, bringing books and small gifts, rebuilding the trust that had been damaged. Emma, Jack, Lily, and now baby Lucy became regular visitors to my condo for afternoons or occasional overnight stays that I scheduled and controlled. Rebecca's journey was more complicated. The divorce, postpartum depression, and financial stress had humbled her, but real change came slowly. Mandatory therapy, as part of their custody arrangement, forced her to confront her manipulative behavior and sense of entitlement. 3 months after Lucy's birth, Rebecca asked to meet me for coffee. She looked tired but more genuine than I'd seen her in years. "I've been trying to write you a letter for months," she said, fidgeting with her cup, "to apologize properly, but everything I wrote sounded fake, even to me." "I appreciate you trying," I said carefully. "The therapist says I have to be specific about what I did wrong," she continued. "So here goes. I was selfish. I tried to manipulate you into taking my children permanently because I was overwhelmed and thought I deserved a fresh start with just the new baby. I lied to everyone, including myself, about my intentions. I harassed you, damaged your property, tried to harm your reputation, and invaded your home. And I did it all while convincing myself I was the victim." Tears slid down her cheeks, but unlike her previous performances, these seemed genuine. "I don't expect forgiveness," she finished, "but I want you to know that I see what I did now, and I'm sorry, really sorry." I didn't offer instant forgiveness or emotional reassurance. Instead, I acknowledged her apology and suggested that rebuilding trust would take time. It was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd had since childhood. As summer approached, our family dynamics continued to evolve. My relationship with my parents improved gradually, with clear boundaries and new respect on both sides. James maintained primary custody of the children, with Rebecca's involvement increasing as her mental health stabilized. The financial issues were addressed through bankruptcy and structured payment plans rather than family bailouts. My Aunt Margaret became an unexpected source of support and wisdom, sharing her own experiences with family boundary setting. The strongest families, she told me, aren't the ones where everyone sacrifices themselves for others. They're the ones where everyone's needs and boundaries are respected. Looking back on the tumultuous journey that began with a simple phone call and a shocking demand, I realized how much I'd grown. I'd learned that sometimes loving your family means refusing to enable them, even when it breaks your heart. By saying no, I had finally taught them to respect my yes. The experience had transformed me from someone who feared family conflict to someone who could stand firm in my truth, with compassion but without compromise. The boundaries I established weren't walls to keep people out, but frameworks for healthier relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. I never did become a mother to my sister's children, but I became a better aunt present on my own terms, offering love and support without resentment or coercion. And in doing so, I modeled for them something they desperately needed to learn: that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself, and that no can sometimes be the most caring word in the English language. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who tried to take advantage of your kindness? How did you handle the situation? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my story resonated with you. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential for your well-being and for building truly healthy relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you strength and courage on your own boundary-setting journey.